Definitely.
I mean, she's been doing it for years, and she's had all the high-powered people on, and from the arts and politics and everything, writers.
You know what? I want to switch mics. All right, folks, I'm recording.
Okay.
Just go ahead. Forget. I'll deal with the camera. You just
All right.
forget about us.
Okay. Here we go.
So can you describe your technique a little bit? The technique you use currently. I mean, I know that techniques evolve over time, but
Well, I think that technique I've been using in the more recent works is it's hard to separate it from a kind of evolution coming forward of my concern for color, and then staying away from a lot of heavy textural images, and but more in the recent paintings, like the Santa Cruz series, the way that I worked was a kind of layers, very thin paint, very watery, and then another layer, and painting here and there, and building up color and the form. I mean, what the image was, I didn't know when I started, and so in that sense, it was sort of connected to the beginnings, you know, of the abstract expressionist beginnings, which were short-lived, but that kind of spontaneous way of working, looking, bringing it forward. But it always seemed like in those paintings I was working with a notion, an overall idea that I was working with, and then there'd be a series. And so it was hard to say it was just this technique, because the technique and the idea and the evolution of the series would all be working together simultaneously. So it wasn't a technique, but it was kind of all that together. Because in those Santa Cruz series paintings, I was drawing with pencil, and an evidence of that drawing on the canvas, which was minimal, but what was sometimes I wanted to have a guideline or a
I'm terribly sorry, man. I have to rush it. I noticed that this camera color balances way off. Let me get that checked out. Show us it right.
He looks pretty good over there.
definitely.
I think he found his place, his calling.
The cameraman.
The cameraman. I never realized how I was wondering. Yeah, he looks really good over there. I think we could make a movie of him as the cameraman. Yeah, the earphones, and the outfit, and
I'll cast you in my next film.
how he stands there. He could stand in a whole film of just the cameraman.
Definitely.
Yeah, he looks good. Yeah, you're welcome.
Actually, this is going to be a very nice shot.
Yeah, so that's the wide angle, I guess. Yeah. There's lots of things to think about. Color, I mean, even here, color balance,
Yeah.
and
I really wanted to get back to that, what you were saying about notion, so that you began with the notion.
yeah.
That's
Well, we'll
because
kind
that's
of
more important.
finish up that little part
Yeah.
there, and then I guess pick it up again. But yeah, that's the thing. We'll go back to that, and but see how important it is to get the. I mean, there's so much stuff that's done today that's just pick up a camera and shoot. The kind of journalistic wartime stuff, and there's a style like that even. To make, you've probably seen movies like that. Yeah, that's okay. But when you see a movie did you see The Girl with the Pearl Earring?
No, my parents saw it.
Man, see that. It's beautifully shot.
There's a movie out right now with Omar Sharif.
Yeah.
Sir Ibrahim. And the colors in that movie are just like...
I want to see that.
It's
The
a wonderful film.
Girl with the Pearl Earring was amazing. the quality of the lighting, the colors, the compositions.
Definitely.
It was an actress, you know. She just looked like he stepped out of the painting
Right.
to be painted again. You know, it was amazing.
What a compliment to Vermeer's
I'm
style
going
and
to
painting.
Yeah.
change my camera angle, go straight on to you, and then occasionally I'll just, when there's a pause, in other words, go for about a minute or two. Give
Well,
me a
you're
pause.
just going to have to work it. I can't
I know.
keep.
Well, I'm gonna have
that-
to, there's gonna have to be breaks for me to move the camera around and get different shots. Like if
Well,
she asks a question, we get a shot of her.
Yeah, but it can't stop every minute. You know, we're going to have to go a while and then move it.
I know when I'm gonna, yeah, all right.
Okay.
And I'm recording.
All right.
Okay.
So let's see. Where were we? We were talking about the integration of the different aspects of moving forward in these paintings. Oh, I was talking about
Move a little closer.
this way? Or she? Okay.
Better?
Yeah, so we can.
Okay.
Just otherwise, it just feels like.
Right, yeah.
In video, everything seems even closer.
Yeah, we can get
Right there?
close. It's easier to talk if we're closer, yeah.
Yeah.
It's easier, it's more
I don't have to
intimate.
be
Yeah,
shouting.
that's better.
All right, that's good.
Yeah, we can send smoke signals. Semaphore? How are we doing?
We're doing good.
Okay.
Now this is real. It's okay.
This is real. I always wonder what reality is. Okay, so we were talking about the formulation of these Santa Cruz series, and there was a combination of things that I did. Sometimes I would draw a line, a pencil, even different weights, and I was doing that maybe. I wanted this sense of sort of a geometric sense, it was also tied to just pure geometry, squares, the
Right.
square, and so on, and so. It's hard to pull that out as a separate thing. But I was using a little bit of pencil, not a lot, and then I would use that maybe as a guide to paint by, and then after a while it would just disappear under layers of paint, and then it would emerge again somewhere because I decided that I wanted that line to be a little, and I wanted that kind of line rather than a paint line. And so, and meanwhile, all the surfaces were building up, and then there was evidence of the process, because something would be left behind, be left there from 20 applications before, so it's a sort of history moving through, developing the painting. Well, that's not unusual for a painter to work that way, but that's how I was working on those paintings. But building up kind of veils or layers of these washes, basically, no thick paint, and then getting to where I like that, it feels right, and so I would just keep going until it felt right.
Right.
I say, well, I think I'll put that aside and move on. And then, but out of that one, I got a sense of where to begin on the next one, because there was something I wanted to explore, and I felt like rather than trying to do it in one painting, I would start on the next one and develop that evolution of that notion,
Right.
or that procedure in that one. Still not ever knowing exactly where I was going, but just do that.
Right.
And so you go from one to the next. And I'd say that's the only series that I worked on, Santa Cruz series, which started back in the early 80s, that had its origins on representational work. And I had started on paper in my little studio over there on First Avenue, which I don't know if you visited there, but your dad did. And I just took windows, looked at windows and what I saw on the window frame, and then out looking through the window, and took that as a starting place. And so these very geometric, squares or rectangles would be a starting place, and then you started looking at it real carefully and you saw things through it that, again, maybe the edge of a house and a trellis, and then there'd be some light falling across in a shadow at an angle, and then you started looking at it more carefully, and there were all kinds of subtleties in the frame, and then there was a quality of light out there, and so I started working with that, and just my paintings on paper. And I think that's probably the origin of the geometry of the later Santa Cruz series that followed that, was just that kind of those window frames that I started off in a realistic way. And then I started to see as I was working on the paper, started to see the space coming through the window as the subject, not the frame or the things, but the space actually coming through. And so I started to paint the space, like, say red, but bring it right through the window. So the space was now turning into kind of had a presence, had a color, it was solid in a way, and it. So sometimes the frame was just that, a framework, but it wasn't really the subject. The space was the subject, and so that gradually led to a little bit larger works, and I did or a couple that were diptychs with 2 or maybe triptych, 3 pieces of paper that made the painting larger. And for a while, it interested me maybe making paintings that just on different pieces of paper that would get, large, and not necessarily square, but maybe saying, off like this, and then there'd be a piece up like that. And, I didn't go too far with that, but it is a viable direction. And so that the Santa Cruz series then just kind of evolved out of that. And then one day I just said, I'm ready to get on a big canvas. And so after a few false starts, I got going, and the early ones up through about number 13 or so were still had vague references, to this frame and the window thing that I've been working on. And but I mean, unless you knew that, I mean, I told you that, you wouldn't know that,
Right.
But that's kind of where that was happening. And then in the early, so I was working on this layering idea, and at first it was a little bit more, what can I say, the surfaces were a little more finished, even, there were areas of color, and then it began to break down where I was overpainting, and it started to turn into something else rather than trying to conform to the initial framework. And it just sort of evolved like that. And there was one aspect to it that was really interesting, was to me, one day I noticed that the diagonal in a painting, a diagonal line near the bottom of the painting, and I said, I understand about the diagonal in perspective. I mean, you put a diagonal in and it kind of creates space, or creates a sense of a surface that goes back in space, illusion. And but I thought, that diagonal is pretty interesting, just as a diagonal, the whole concept, the whole idea, feeling of diagonal. And so then I found that I was coming again in another painting. So I started just to work with the diagonal as an entity almost, and that was kind of fascinating, just that simple thought, what led to a lot, kind of a development with this diagonal going on, and then that developed through maybe 20 paintings or so, and then one day I said, well, what if I took the other opposite diagonal and came the other way And I realized that when I did that, I described the square.
Right. Back to the framework concept.
Yeah, but I didn't make the square. But if you can take the square away, but if you take the diagonal like this, that's another way to describe a square or a rectangle, if you like. And I thought that's pretty interesting, to have this diagonal. And so there was not only in the big paintings, but there was a series of smaller paintings which your dad has on paper. It's called Finding the Square. And it was just a search for the square in a painting, this, and then I would shift the diagonal a little tiny bit there and a little tiny bit there and paint, and it would disappear, and then I'd do it, work with it until I had all these kind of layers floating almost in space, but there was this diagonal that was implying a square. So that was kind of how I got moved on in those paintings. And I started working with that over and over again.
Let's try putting slide on. When you talk
Okay,
about
maybe I'll go just one more step and then we can do that because I want to get to this point.
Right.
And then you can maybe put this painting in, which is the one up at the museum, because she mentioned that and tie it together. So I was doing this, and all the paintings were ending up. I think Naeem said they were like X paintings, and he has a bunch of those. And that's going on. And one day, that X separated at the middle, and it became this and this, and there was a little space in there. And all of a sudden, there was an upper and a lower, a ground and a sky, or a cloud and a mountain. It was like an upper and lower, like that. And for me, it was just this kind of ding, and something happened, and I didn't know exactly what happened. It just happened, and then there was this, and I said to myself, well, that's where this whole thing's going, to get to this place where this diagonal separates in the middle and becomes upper and lower. It was very satisfying. So that painting there, I think, is the second painting after. The one I still have is the first one that happened, and then I think that's the second one, I believe. And
Are those oppositional forces for you that work on the canvas, or complementary forces?
Okay, you want to change that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Put a slide.
Let's see what he changes here. Oh, he wants to get some things on.
You want to talk about those same ones?
If you want to go to the, can you get to the Santa Cruz series?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, that would be the series to look at.
I like that series a lot.
Boy, these are really washed away. Too much light.
Tell me if they're upside down, side or right, or really.
No, that's right side up. Good, good. Yeah, you're okay.
This must be like your life flashing before your very eyes, right?
Yeah, uh-oh. I think it's about over.
No, that's not what I was implying. It's just, it's like a photo album of your
Yeah.
life. It's incredible.
You could,
Those are the ones
okay,
from the
well,
studio, right?
you can go back that one, because we're on the window paintings, and we could go through those again, because we'll get right to the Santa Cruz series from this. Boy, these are just for Maymanah's benefit, right?
Well, they'll also for the viewers.
But you're not going to be shooting this, are you?
Yes, I am.
Well, that's so washed out. There's so much light on it.
No, I can expose it.
Can't you just put those in?
Oh, yeah, I will. But I want to give the impression that we're starting in the studio. I will use it.
You can
I
put.
can take these and overlap them onto the screen.
Yeah, you can take the ones that you've already transferred. Yeah, because this is way washed out. Yeah,
You will.
yeah. So, yeah, because that's not at all how it looks. Much stronger colors. I just saw this down my mother. She has this one. This is one of the ones that maybe I shouldn't talk. I won't say a word. But you ask a question, we probably should stick with that and come back to this.
I just forgot what my question was. Oh, that's right.
Upper and lower. And
Upper, lower, and
come.
oppositional. It's like the atoms separated almost.
Yeah, there you go. Or like in genetics.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like that. That's it. So we can, that's, why don't you say that once we get going here? Because that's, you got it.
Okay.
That's exactly it.
Let's try this for a second.
Okay, can
Go
you?
ahead and talk about that.
Well, okay, well, we're going to come back to something else, but this is a painting that, one of the window paintings on paper, and it's a diptych. Yeah, that's right. Just don't have the full edge out there. Which was the two doors of my studio looking out, like that. And so it's pretty realistic, about as realistic as I got there. So you can kind of get a measure. That's it.
Definitely.
And
You mentioned before your emphasis on color. Is this in this series? I mean,
are we going now?
Yeah, we're recording. I want to try something.
Okay,
See if that turn off.
because I wasn't sure. That noise over there, I'm not sure if that's going to, excuse me, but I think we won't go through it twice.
Okay. Go ahead.
Are we okay? All right. So, all right, let's go back. We were talking about the break, the separation of the X figure, the two diagonals,